The message came just as I was setting the table for one. 8 words that split my heart open. You aren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there. I stared at the glowing screen, waiting for the punchline that never came. After everything I had done, after paying for the house they lived in, my own son was uninviting me from his table. That was the moment I knew I had to take back control. Hi, I'm Diane Whitmore. I'm 63 years old, a retired high school English teacher, and until recently, a woman who believed love could buy forgiveness. Where are you watching from tonight? I'd really like to know because sometimes it helps to remember we're not alone when life tests us this way. Now, let me tell you how one simple text message unraveled 30 years of devotion. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked too loudly that night. The casserole I'd baked sat untouched, cooling beside the neatly folded napkins. I had been so excited to join Michael and his wife Laura for their first dinner in the new house. The same house I helped them buy. It had taken months of paperwork, transfers, and late-night budgeting to make that dream possible. Every payment, every document filed, every sleepless night was worth it, or so I thought. I wanted them to have stability, comfort, a home filled with laughter. Now, as I stared at those words, "You aren't invited," the irony hit me like a cold slap. The house I'd poured my savings into had no place for me inside it. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe Michael's phone had been stolen, or maybe Laura had sent it without his knowledge. I waited a minute, then another. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Is everything okay?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Nothing. My chest tightened. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Once. Twice, 3 times, no answer. The silence after the 3rd call was deafening. It wasn't just about dinner. It was about being erased, about realizing that somehow I'd gone from being his world to being an inconvenience. I sat there for a long while, phone still in my hand, trying to breathe through the ache. The kind of ache that doesn't shout, it whispers. It settles in your ribs and tells you you've been replaced. Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle at first, then harder, tapping against the kitchen window. I watched it blur the reflection of my own face, tired, confused, and suddenly so small in the home that used to feel warm. I kept replaying the last few weeks in my mind. How happy Michael had sounded when I told him the last mortgage payment was handled. How he hugged me, whispering, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom. I guess now I did know. He'd do dinner without me." I don't remember when the tears started. I only remember their warmth and how they fell onto my phone screen, mixing with the glow of that cruel message. "You aren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." There was something so final about it, like a closed door I wasn't meant to knock on again. I wanted to scream, to call him again and demand an explanation, but instead I just whispered one word, "Okay." And in that moment, something in me shifted. The woman who'd sacrificed her comfort for her son, who'd filled his fridge, paid his bills, and prayed for his happiness suddenly saw herself from a distance, and she didn't like what she saw. I had mistaken giving for belonging. I had confused generosity with love, and I realized that somehow my son had learned that same mistake, but from the other side. The clock struck 9. The casserole had gone cold. The rain had stopped, leaving a dull quiet that made the house feel even emptier. I got up, wrapped the food, and placed it in the fridge. The act was mechanical, the body moving because the heart couldn't. I turned off the lights and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint glow of the phone still resting on the counter. It felt like a funeral, not for a person, but for a bond. But beneath the grief, a tiny spark flickered. It was small, fragile, but real, a thought I couldn't ignore. If they could shut me out that easily, maybe it was time I stopped buying my way in. That night, I slept with that thought tucked against my chest like a secret. It didn't bring comfort, but it did bring clarity. And clarity, I would soon learn, can be the first step toward freedom. People often say time heals everything, but they forget to mention that time also hides the slow cracks forming beneath what looks unbreakable. Ours began years before that text message, back when my son was still the boy who called me his hero. Michael was my only child. He came into my life during a storm, literally. The night he was born, thunder rattled the hospital windows and the power went out twice. I remember holding him under the emergency lights, whispering, "It's you and me, kiddo. Always you and me." When my husband David passed away from a heart attack 8 years later, that promise became my anchor. I had no family nearby, no savings worth speaking of, and a boy who just lost his father. I told myself I'd make sure Michael never felt that kind of emptiness again. So I worked. God, did I work. Daytime teaching English at the high school. Evenings tutoring kids who couldn't afford extra help. On weekends, I graded essays until my eyes burned. Every penny that didn't go to bills went into the Michael Fund, his education, his future, his dreams. We didn't have much, but we had us. I remember Friday nights on the couch watching old movies with popcorn. He'd fall asleep halfway through, his small head resting on my arm. I used to think, this is enough. This love will carry us through anything. And for a while it did. Michael grew into the kind of young man teachers brag about, respectful, driven, funny in that quiet way that sneaks up on you. When he got into college on partial scholarship, I cried harder than I did the day he was born. I packed his things, slipped a letter into his suitcase, and told him to call me every Sunday. He did faithfully for years. Then came Laura. The first time he brought her home, she had that polished, confident look, the kind that could make you feel underdressed in your own living room. But she smiled warmly, complimented my cooking, and called me Mrs. Whitmore, even after I told her to just say Diane. At first, I adored her. She was smart, ambitious, full of plans. She talked about starting a business, about moving to a bigger city one day. I thought, good for them. They'll build something beautiful together. When they got married, I gave them everything I could: money for the venue, furniture for their first apartment, even my mother's old dining set. Watching them dance at their wedding, I thought I was witnessing the start of their forever. But forever has a way of shrinking when pride moves in. The small things began first subtle, easy to dismiss. Laura would sigh when I offered to help. Or she'd joke about how some moms can't let go. At first, I laughed with her. I didn't want to be that mother, the clingy one, the meddler. I told myself she was just nervous about boundaries, about forming her own household. But soon, the calls became less frequent. The Sunday visits turned into every other Sunday, then once a month. And when they did visit, Laura was always elsewhere, eyes on her phone or checking the time. Michael, sweet boy that he was, tried to keep the peace. He'd tell me, Laura just likes her space, Mom. She's not good with too much family time. So I stepped back. I thought that's what love meant, giving space, even when it hurt. But space, I learned, can quietly become distance. A year later, when Michael called asking for help with a down payment, my heart lifted. Not because he needed money, but because he needed me. He said, Mom, you always told me to find something stable before starting a family. We found the perfect place, but we're a bit short. I didn't even let him finish. I told him I'd handle it, and I did. I liquidated a portion of my retirement, sold a few antique pieces, and moved some savings I'd been guarding for emergencies. I even organized everything, every transfer, every receipt, neatly labeled in a binder. I told myself it wasn't a loss, it was love. When I handed him the envelope that contained the final wire confirmation, he hugged me so tightly I could feel his heartbeat. He whispered, "You're the best mom in the world." And in that moment, every sacrifice felt worth it, because I believed kindness would always come back home. I see now that was the start of my blindness. Not because I gave too much, but because I expected them to value it the same way I did. Looking back, there were warnings I ignored. Laura began talking about financial independence, mostly to Michael, but loud enough for me to hear. She'd joke about how some people couldn't move on unless they were still needed. Michael would glance at her, then at me, torn between us. I'd smile and change the subject, pretending it didn't sting. If I had known where those little moments were leading, if I'd known they'd one day culminate in that cold message, I might have spoken up sooner. But love can be a quiet kind of blindness, and mine by then had already gone deaf. The day they found the house, Michael called me, sounding like a boy again. His voice had that old spark I hadn't heard since college. Bright, breathless, full of hope. "Mom, you won't believe this place. It's perfect," he said. "There's a big kitchen, a yard, and even a little room Laura wants to turn into an office. It just feels like home." Home. That word hit me like sunlight after a long winter. I wanted nothing more than for my son to feel safe, to build the kind of stability I'd spent decades chasing for him. But there was hesitation in his tone. I could hear it in the pause before he spoke again. The thing is, he said carefully, we're a bit short for the down payment. We're trying to avoid another loan. He didn't need to say more. I'd spent years preparing for this, saving, planning, quietly setting aside what I could. Not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted him to never struggle the way I had. How much? I asked. He told me the number. It made my stomach flip, but I didn't flinch. I told him I'd take care of it. His voice cracked with relief. Mom, are you sure? That's a lot. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. It's just money, sweetheart. You're my only child. If I can help you build a life, that's all that matters. If I'd known that life wouldn't include me, I might have thought twice. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and transfers. I called banks, withdrew funds, and printed confirmation slips, one for each transaction. 174 in total by the end of it. I kept them all in a small wooden box, tied with a red ribbon. I told myself I'd give it to him someday, a record of love, proof of what we'd built together. When they got the keys, Michael insisted I come see the place. I arrived with champagne and my camera, ready to capture memories. Laura greeted me at the door. Her smile was polite but tight, like it had been practiced. She wore a crisp white blouse, not a speck of dust on her. Oh, Diane, you didn't have to come all the way out here, she said, stepping aside. I wouldn't miss it, I told her. This is a big day. Michael hugged me, and for a moment, everything felt right again. He showed me around the kitchen with its shiny marble counters, the living room that smelled of new paint, the small office Laura had already claimed with a single vase of white roses. It's beautiful, I said, running my hand over the stair rail. Feels like a home already, Laura nodded. We're excited. It's just a lot to take care of. New responsibilities, new routines. You know how it is. Her tone was light, but there was an undercurrent, a subtle reminder that this was their world now. I laughed softly. You'll do great. You both always do. But as we stood there, I noticed something small but sharp. She never once said, thank you, not even when Michael mentioned I'd helped with the down payment. She just smiled and said, well, it's all worked out in the end, hasn't it? In the months that followed, the distance between us widened. They got busy settling in. I tried to respect that. At first, I'd call every week offering to bring over a meal or help unpack. Each time, Laura's voice would float through the phone, too smooth to sound sincere. Oh, Diane, that's so sweet of you, but we're really fine. The place is chaos right now. Maybe once things calm down. Things never calmed down. When Michael did call, it was usually brief. He'd sound distracted, tired, but always ended with, love you, Mom. I clung to that. Those 3 words became my lifeline, the thread I refused to believe could break. Then came the invitation, the first dinner in the new house. I remember how my heart fluttered reading it. Mom, dinner next Friday, just the 3 of us. Bring that casserole I love. I spent days preparing. I polished my old earrings, baked a test batch, even bought a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford. I imagined laughter around the table, stories shared, the feeling of belonging again. But that dinner never happened, because just a few hours before I was supposed to leave, that message came through. 8 words that rewrote everything I thought I knew. You aren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there. It's strange, the way pain can echo through the things you once loved. After that night, I couldn't look at the box of receipts the same way. Each one, once a symbol of devotion, now felt like evidence of my own blindness. The house had become a monument not to love, but to imbalance, a place I helped build but could never enter. And as I sat at my kitchen table that night, the realization burned through me like truth often does. I hadn't lost my place in their home that evening. I'd been slowly written out of it long before. The smell of baked apples filled my kitchen that evening. I remember the hum of the oven, the faint warmth wrapping around me like a memory. It was supposed to be a special night, my first dinner in their new home. I'd made Michael's favorite pie, the one with the buttery crust and caramel drizzle he used to beg for on his birthdays. I'd even packed it in my mother's old pie carrier, the one I hadn't used in years. I was ready early, dressed in my best navy blouse, earrings polished, hair neatly pinned. I wanted to look like the kind of mother a son would be proud to welcome into his new life. I checked the time, 6:47 p.m. Dinner was at 7. The sky outside was fading from soft pink to deep blue when my phone buzzed. I smiled, expecting it to be Michael telling me he was on his way to pick me up. But instead the words appeared like a slap, cold and unfiltered. "You aren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." For a moment I didn't understand. I blinked, waiting for the rest of the message, just kidding, a laughing emoji, something to make it make sense. Nothing came. My first instinct was disbelief. Then came confusion. And then, finally, something heavy. A silence that pressed against my chest so hard it hurt to breathe. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then I typed, "Michael, what do you mean?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. My phone stayed still after that. No call, no message, no explanation. Just stillness. I tried calling. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. The last time, my voice cracked when I said, "Sweetheart, please call me back." But there was only silence. The pie sat cooling on the counter beside me. The house felt colder by the second. I sank into the kitchen chair, the one that had always been his chair when he was younger. I could almost hear him there laughing, telling me about school, tapping his spoon against his glass. I used to joke that someday he'd have a house of his own with a kitchen just like mine. Now he did, and I wasn't welcome in it. I picked up my phone again. Another message had come through, shorter this time, more final. "Please don't make this a thing, Mom. Laura just needs space. Hope you understand. Hope you understand." The words stung worse than the first message. I wanted to shout to ask what I had done, what space I had invaded, but instead my hands fell limp in my lap. Somewhere deep down I realized this wasn't sudden. It was the final act of something that had been building for years. Every polite rejection, every rescheduled visit, every strained smile from Laura, it had all led here. Still, I couldn't stop the tears. They came hot and silent, falling onto the phone, blurring the text. It wasn't just the rejection, it was the humiliation. Being told, "Not today, not you, not anymore." When the tears finally stopped, what came next wasn't rage. It was stillness, a strange, almost hollow calm. I wiped my face, stood up and covered the pie with foil. I placed it carefully in the fridge, a small act of control in a moment where everything else had slipped away. The kitchen light buzzed softly. Outside, a single street lamp flickered against the rain-slicked pavement. I watched it for a long time, the reflection trembling on the window pane. I thought about all the years I'd spent teaching my students that words mattered, that how we speak to each other can heal or destroy. And here I was, destroyed by 8 small words. But under that quiet grief, something unexpected stirred something fierce, not anger, resolve. It began as a whisper in my mind. Enough. Enough giving without gratitude. Enough apologizing for existing. Enough pretending love meant endless forgiveness. I realized, standing there in my silent kitchen, that I had spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at a table I had built myself. And now that they'd made it clear I wasn't welcome, I didn't want that seat anymore. I picked up my phone one last time and typed just 2 letters. Okay, not out of surrender, but out of clarity. That was the moment I decided quietly, firmly, that I would take back what I had given. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. The pie would stay in the fridge. The receipts, the payments, the sacrifices, all of it I would reclaim in my own way. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this. The woman sitting in that kitchen wasn't the same one who'd sent money with trembling hands and a hopeful heart. She was done waiting for invitations. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. And that fire, calm, steady, and certain, would soon change everything. The morning after the message, I woke up before dawn. For a moment, I forgot what had happened. The soft gray light made everything look untouched, peaceful. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand and felt the ache settle back in like an old injury. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even sigh. Instead, I sat up, made myself a cup of black coffee, and walked to the small desk in my living room, the one where I used to grade papers and write lesson plans. That desk had seen years of devotion. Now it would witness something different, the undoing. I opened my laptop, logged into my online banking, and stared at the screen for a long time. The numbers were all there, the transfers I'd made for the down payment, the automatic monthly payments for the renovations, the small deposits I'd been sending just to help out. Why, line after line, month after month, my love translated into digits and decimals. It looked sterile, cold, not like love at all. That realization hit harder than the betrayal itself. For years, I had told myself that helping my son financially was a way of staying connected, of remaining part of his story. But now, those same payments had become invisible threads tying me to people who clearly didn't want me near. So, I clicked cancel. First, the home insurance auto debit gone. Then the maintenance fund I'd been quietly contributing to every month stopped. Then the automatic payment to the renovation company deleted. With each click, something in me lightened. It wasn't revenge, it was release. I wasn't punishing him, I was reclaiming myself. Solved? After that, I turned to the wooden box, the one tied with a red ribbon, holding all 174 receipts. Each one was dated, labeled, and preserved like little love letters. I sat cross-legged on the living room rug, running my fingers over the edges of each slip. They were proof, not of generosity, but of how much I'd blurred the line between giving and losing myself. One by one, I began deleting the digital copies. Then slowly, methodically, I fed the paper ones into the shredder. The sound was strangely soothing. Each receipt dissolved into thin, curling ribbons, a soft, steady hum of closure. When I reached the last one, I hesitated. It was the confirmation for the final transfer, the largest payment I'd ever made. My handwriting on the corner read, "For Michael and Laura, to their new beginning." I looked at it for a long time. Then I whispered, "And now, mine," and fed it through. The machine hummed once more, and it was done. That afternoon, I drove to the local library to drop off a few donation books. I hadn't been there in months. As I stepped inside, the familiar smell of paper and dust filled me with something I hadn't felt in a while: peace. "Diane, it's been ages." It was Miriam, the head librarian, an old friend from my teaching days. She hugged me tightly. "We're short on volunteers this month," she said. "You should come by more often." I smiled. Maybe I will. And I meant it. That's how it started, a quiet shift. I began showing up every Tuesday and Friday, helping with children's reading hour, reshelving books, making tea for the older patrons. At first, it was just something to do with my hands, but soon I realized it was doing something for my heart. For the first time in years, people saw me not as someone's mother, not as a bank account, but as Diane, the woman who loved books, who remembered stories, who still had more to give, just not to those who didn't value it. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Michael. For a moment, I just stared at his name flashing across the screen. My pulse quickened, but my hands didn't shake this time. "Mom," he said when I answered. His voice was tense, impatient. "Did you cancel the payments? The mortgage people called. They said your transfer stopped." "Yes," I said simply. "I did." He was silent for a second, thrown off by my calm tone. Then his voice sharpened. "Why would you do that? You know we need that help right now." I took a breath. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, composed, still. "You told me I wasn't welcome, Michael," I said softly, "so I assumed my help wasn't either." He stammered something, a mix of guilt and frustration, but I didn't let it pierce me. "This isn't punishment," I continued. "It's correction. You asked for space. I'm giving it to you." Before he could respond, I added, "I hope you make your homework. I truly do. But from now on, you'll do it on your own." Then, for the first time in my life, I ended the call first. That night, I stood by my window and watched the streetlights flicker against the quiet road. For years, I'd given from a place of love that demanded nothing in return. But I'd forgotten that even love needs boundaries. For the first time, I didn't feel small or discarded. I felt clear, whole. I'd spent decades giving away my worth piece by piece. Now, I was collecting it back quietly, gracefully, and one boundary at a time. 3 days passed before I saw them again. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where time feels thick and slow. I had just finished arranging chrysanthemums by the window when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I knew that sound. I didn't need to look. When the knock came sharp, quick, impatient, I already knew what was waiting on the other side. I opened the door, and there they were, Michael and Laura. He looked tired, a little disheveled, like he hadn't slept well. Laura stood beside him, arms folded, jaw tight. "Mom, can we talk?" Michael said. His tone was clipped, but beneath it was something else, unease. "Of course," I said quietly. "Come in." They stepped inside. I noticed how Laura didn't take her shoes off, a small thing, but it said enough. I gestured toward the couch. "Would you like some tea?" "No thank you," she said flatly. So I sat across from them, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Michael leaned forward. "We just found out the payments stopped. The house loan, the contractor, everything. What's going on?" I met his eyes. "I told you. I canceled them." "Why?" His voice cracked slightly. "You know we've been struggling. You knew how important that help was." I took a slow breath. "I also know that your wife doesn't want me at your table. I'm not going to keep paying for a place where I'm unwelcome." Laura's eyes flashed. "This isn't about you being unwelcome. I just wanted one dinner without feeling judged or corrected." I tilted my head slightly. "Judged, Laura? I've hardly spoken to you in months. The last time we spoke, I brought you a gift basket and you said you don't eat cheap grocery chocolate." Her cheeks colored. "That's not what I meant." Michael cut in, frustrated. "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. You know how she gets sometimes, but this isn't the answer." I felt a small ache in my chest, the kind that used to silence me, but not anymore. "Michael," I said softly, "when you sent that text, you aren't invited, my wife doesn't want you there. It wasn't just a message, it was a choice, and I accepted it." He rubbed his temples. "Mom." "No," I continued, my voice steady. "I accepted it and then I acted on it. I stopped financing your life because I realized I'd been trying to buy love that should have been free." For a moment, silence filled the room. The air was heavy, but clean, the kind of silence that comes after truth. Laura stood abruptly. "You're being dramatic. It's just money." I turned to her, calm as stone. "No, Laura, it's not just money. It's time. It's energy. It's years of working late nights, saving, sacrificing so my son could have what I never did. It's me missing vacations, skipping dinners, and selling jewelry I loved, not because I had to, but because I wanted him to start strong." I leaned slightly forward, my eyes meeting hers. "And all I asked for in return was a seat at the table I helped build. You decided I didn't deserve even that." Laura's lips parted, but no words came out. Michael's shoulders slumped. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but you did. And sometimes, meaning well doesn't erase the wound." He stared at the floor for a long time. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "you take responsibility for your own home. You pay your own bills. You stand on your own 2 feet the way I raised you to." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you." "That's the thing about dependence," I said. "It feels like love until the source stops pouring." Laura finally spoke, softer this time. "We shouldn't have sent that text. It was cruel." I exhaled, a long, quiet breath. "Cruelty is often born out of pride. I forgive you, both of you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back." Michael looked up. "Can we still visit? Just maybe not today, but soon?" I smiled faintly. "If you come because you want to, not because you need to, my door will always be open." When they left, the air in the house felt lighter. The silence wasn't sad anymore. It was peaceful. For years, I had imagined confrontation as shouting, tears, chaos. But instead, it had come as calm truth, and that was more powerful than any raised voice. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of something my mother used to say. The moment you stop begging to be understood, you start being respected. And that's exactly how it felt. Not victorious, not vengeful, just free. It's strange how silence changes after forgiveness. Before, it felt hollow, like something missing. Now, it feels full, like something whole. Weeks passed since that Sunday. No texts, no calls, and yet, for the first time in years, I didn't wake up waiting for my phone to light up. I'd rise early, brew my coffee, and sit by the window where the chrysanthemums bloomed brighter than ever. The same sunlight that once revealed the dust on my walls now painted everything gold. Maybe peace doesn't arrive with grand gestures. Maybe it tiptoes in quietly when you finally stop chasing what was never yours to hold. The library became my second home. Every Tuesday, I'd help the children pick out picture books, reading with voices that made them giggle. Every Friday, I'd help Miriam organize the shelves, sharing tea between rows of forgotten stories. There was something healing about handling books, the weight of them, the smell, the stories they held. They reminded me that every life, every heartbreak, was just one chapter in a much bigger tale. One evening, Miriam asked me, "Diane, do you ever miss teaching?" I smiled. "Every day. But maybe I'm still teaching, just differently now." She nodded, and I realized she was right. Healing, after all, is a kind of education, the slow learning of how to live again without needing anyone's permission. Around the fourth week, I got a letter in the mail, not an email, not a text, a real letter, with handwriting I knew instantly. It was from Michael. I stood by the kitchen counter and unfolded the paper carefully. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about love and boundaries. You were right. I depended on your help more than I depended on myself, and that wasn't fair to you or to me. Laura and I are figuring things out. It's not easy, but we're trying. I don't expect you to undo what you did. I just wanted to say I understand now, and I'm sorry. Would you like to come over next weekend? Not for a dinner, just coffee. We'll make it ourselves. Love, Michael. I read it twice. Then I placed it on the table and just stood there, smiling through quiet tears. It wasn't about the invitation. It was about acknowledgement, about my son seeing me not as a wallet or a safety net, but as a person again. I didn't reply right away. I let the letter sit there for 2 days, the paper curling slightly at the edges. Then I wrote back simply, I'd love that. And this time, you can pick the coffee. That Saturday, when I pulled up to their house, I noticed something small but meaningful, a welcome mat at the door that said, home is earned. When Michael opened the door, he hugged me first, no hesitation, no awkwardness, just a long, genuine hug that said everything words couldn't. Laura joined a few minutes later, holding a tray with mugs. She looked nervous but sincere. Coffee, she said, offering a tentative smile. No dinner, no tension. I laughed softly. That sounds perfect. We sat together not as mother, son, and outsider, but as 3 people trying again. The air was fragile but honest. At one point, Michael said, You know, the house looks different now that we're paying for everything ourselves. How so? I asked. He shrugged, smiling faintly. Feels more like ours. I reached over and touched his hand. That's how it should feel. And for the first time in a long while, I saw pride in his eyes, not the kind that distances, but the kind that roots. That night, when I returned home, I didn't feel the ache of loneliness. I felt full of moments, lessons, and a quiet sense of grace. I walked through my living room, past the empty space where the receipt box used to sit. In its place now was a small potted fern, new, green, alive. I touched its leaves gently and whispered, We're both growing. As I sat down to write in my journal, I found myself reflecting on everything, the pain, the anger, the letting go. There was a time I thought love meant endless giving, even when it hollowed me out. But now I know real love is not measured by sacrifice. It's measured by respect, by space, by balance. Sometimes, stepping back is the most loving thing you can do. And as for me, I'm still a mother. But I'm also Diane, a woman who gave, who lost, who rebuilt. A woman who finally remembered her own worth. I'll end my story the same way I started it, with the message that broke me. You aren't invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there. But now, I hear those words differently. They don't sting anymore. Because I've built my own table, one where peace always has a seat, and I never have to ask for permission to belong. And that, my friends, is how I took back control.